Mother's Day is just 4 days away, and I'd like to say I'm very thankful for my godly mother, Diana Blythe. Among her many, many qualities, my mom is truly a prayer warrior. And it takes me back to Mother's Day 2018 when we were in a revival meeting in Virginia. And the few days leading up to the revival, we wrote a song in honor of Mom and sang it as a surprise for her on that morning. And the song is titled Mama's Knees. And it pays tribute not only to her as a prayer warrior, but to every mother that's a dedicated woman of prayer. Now, the word prayer, or the concept of praying, as we all know, is mentioned hundreds of times from cover to cover throughout Scripture. And in James chapter 5, verse 16, we read, "The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man availeth much." And we know this isn't just alluding just to men, but mankind. The effectual fervent prayer of a righteous man or a woman availeth much. And in 1 Thessalonians 5 and 17, Paul said we should do it without ceasing. We can't stay on our knees 24/7, but our line of communication to the throne room is always open, which means we can have a prayer on our heart 24/7. And a few years ago, I had a conversation with a friend who's a preacher's wife, and she expressed some very deep concern for her cousin who was dabbling in satanic worship. And some may wonder, why in the world are you bringing that up in a subject like this? But it was interesting because she said this young man told her, her cousin said the satanic church was fasting and praying during that time for Christians to stop praying. And I relayed our conversation to my family afterward, and we all agreed, if the followers of Satan were fasting and praying, that we as the church would stop praying. It demonstrates the real, genuine, awesome power of prayer. And we all know prayer is talking with the Lord. But someone that is a prayer warrior goes farther than just casual prayer. This is someone whose prayer is effectual and fervent, as we read earlier. This person intercedes in prayer. They engage in spiritual warfare on behalf of their family, their church, their nation, whatsoever the situation may be. And one preacher said, "I've often went to prayer and I didn't have the words to speak, but I've won many, many battles by simply saying, 'Oh God.'" He didn't have the words. You and I have been there many times. We don't even know exactly how to express the burden on our heart. But a prayer warrior will go to God in prayer and cry out to Him. One place in Scripture even speaks that it's with groanings that cannot be uttered. But that's the mark of a prayer warrior that gets in that spirit of prayer and they know how to touch heaven. A prayer warrior is often going about their normal day, and all of a sudden, they feel a burden out of the blue to pray about a particular need. You and I have been there. Sometimes we're awakened out of sleep as the Lord will deal with our heart to pray. And something like this happened to a dear Christian mother that we know, who was burdened for her son who was lost, and also for her daughter-in-law that didn't know the Lord. They were newly married, and one night they were driving down the road when all of a sudden the young man felt a strong uneasiness. He couldn't even explain it. He just felt extremely uneasy. And so he felt he should pull over beside the road. His wife didn't understand it either, but she could tell he was really troubled. So they both agreed to just sit there until this strange feeling, this uneasy feeling passed. And after quite a while, that feeling lifted, and the young man felt he and his wife could continue down the road. They hadn't traveled very far when they came upon a terrible wreck. Bodies were laying beside the road, covered in white sheets. And as soon as the young man and the woman made it past the wreck, he pulled over again and called his mom. And by this time, it was around 2 o'clock in the morning. His mother answered the phone quickly, and the young man said, "Mama, were you asleep?" She said, "No, son." He said, "Mama, what are you doing awake at 2 o'clock in the morning?" She said, "Son, I've been praying for you. I've been on my knees praying for you and for your wife." And so he explained what had just happened, and it was obvious that Mama was in tune with heaven. He knew if she hadn't obeyed the prodding of the Lord, that he and his wife very well could have been taken out into eternity, lost without the Lord. And God help us to hold one another up in prayer. When someone crosses our mind out of the clear blue, more than likely, the Lord is dealing with our hearts to pray for that individual. We don't even have to know the need. Sometimes we're walking beside someone in the grocery store or driving past someone in traffic, and we feel an urgency to pray a silent prayer on that individual's behalf. And it's so important that we yield to those nudges from God. A dear pastor friend told us of the many times that he would walk into his church on Sunday morning and he would feel a tug on his coat sleeve. And he turned to see one of the little church grannies, one of his prayer warriors, who would say, "Pastor, I prayed through for you this morning," and they'd point their little finger and they'd say, "And God's going to help you today." He said, "I felt the effects of their prayers as I stepped into the pulpit. I felt extra strength from the Lord during those times." And then he also told us that he felt the effects when some of those elders began to pass away and move to heaven. He said their absence left a vacancy in the church because there weren't many younger people who were willing to step into the shoes of a prayer warrior. And today, can I ask you, would your family or your friends describe you as a prayer warrior? I trust that answer would be yes in all of our lives, because our churches, our homes, and our nation needs prayer warriors more than ever before. And God help you and I to be determined to be one.